I'm Mark. This is Kirk Art Studio, and I'm getting ready to work on this painting, which is a pretty good size. It's 22 by 30, and it's a scene in Washington here, near the southern end of Hood Canal by a little town called Union. And from here, there's a house that has been abandoned. It used to be a studio and I believe a gallery. And from there you can see, it sits right on the water, and you can see right across the canal to Hoodsport, and then there are Olympic Mountains behind that. And some of the canal will be featured here, and also in the foreground I'm going to put a beached craft of some kind, I think just a fishing boat. And there's a big rockery, and there will be some puddles on the ground, and they'll be reflecting some of the sky and the building behind it. And I've got resource photos, but I've kind of synthesized this whole composition from a whole bunch of them, and I'll show a few as I take you through the process. So that's what this is all about. It's my method, and you'll see I'm kind of deliberate, but I still like a painterly effect, a feel to my work, and I'm not into photorealism, but although I definitely appreciate the technical ability that goes into creating them, I like to keep mine a little more expressive. So yeah, you'll see how this is completed, all phases, and I really thank you for tuning in, and let's get with it. What do we like here? Definitely want to use something soft. Not seeing the one I want. I have brushes all over, that's the problem. So, take a sec here and I'll look. Well, rummaging around a bit, come up with this. It's super dry, soft, and hopefully what I need. So I'm getting back into the panes, mixing it with the color that I used for the sky. And I can afford to be kind of bold here. So I'm going to pull some of this up into the cloud. And I don't like what this brush is doing. There we go. Just needed a little more water. Trying to get the color in there evenly distributed. The shapes here, at first, it can be touched in, and of course you got to at all times be aware of where your light's coming from. And I guess I could just say it's coming from above, obviously, but it's coming from the above and from this direction primarily. I really want to see how this works with this, and just allowing the water to be the vehicle and see where it moves. the part that you have to contend with is getting the shadow color right next to the blue of the sky and the open spaces, because even though it might appear hard-edged at the moment, I'm going to soften it up as it sets in. I need a little more up in here. I'm trying to think of the cloud as an object, a three-dimensional object that has a lot of volume and curvature, and we know it's soft and we can't leave hard edges, but we also have to be bold enough to use some dark values to create more depth and volume. So if we did all of the shading in that kind of a light tone or a medium tone without some darker areas, it would flatten out. You wouldn't be able to move back and underneath with your eye, because it would all appear to be the same distance. So as we go further underneath, we're going to add more and more darks. And then putting a little bit of dark back. This brush is not working out. Bristles have decided they want to be independent of one another. But I'm sticking with it, as you can see. What, am I too lazy to go get a different one? So, yeah, that looks blotchy. I'm going to give it a spritz. And I'm going to take a brush with some soft, dry bristles and maneuver here a little bit. Pull a little color here and there. So even in these clouds, I'm thinking my process, it's going to take 2 or 3 applications as this dries, because I'm going to be softening all of these edges and in some instances here where the water's pooled up a little, you can see my paper's starting to really buckle. You just have to be patient and see what develops as it sets in. And where you do see hard edges forming, just take a little bit of water, a damp brush, and just very lightly pick up a little bit of that color. Now where you see interesting things developing, like here, you want to keep an eye on it, but at the same time, I don't want to do anything reckless and lose it. If you find that you've got too much going on and the area is getting too dark, too rich, you can turn your brush into kind of a mop just by cleaning it, squeezing out the water. Just squeeze it into your bowl and shaping the tip, kind of a chisel shape. and go back to the area that you want to lighten up, and very lightly start picking up. The reason I say very lightly, watercolor paper is so super sensitive, and if you're not careful you can distress it and you can start actually messing up the fibers of the paper. And usually to get an area to lighten up significantly, you've got to do 3 or 4 mop jobs. And another thing that works quite well, really, is the old tissue. But you gotta be careful here too that you're not touching areas that you don't want affected. And there's a little bit of pigment. I don't know that you can see it on camera, but there's a little bit of pigment that picked up. Not a whole lot. I'm just going to push. So you're not going to get, that's one of the reasons that you have to have patience, is if you allow too much color to roam and get into the areas that you want to retain as white, it's pretty hard to get it 100% eradicated. You know, it's never going to be as white as the untouched parts of your paper, like these areas. That's never going to be this. So be aware, be patient, and vigilant. So what I mean by that, you can't just go off, you know, for 20 minutes, half an hour, and expect this to behave in your absence, because it won't. You're going to get this kind of thing where you can see how all the pigment now has come down. This paper is mounted this way. It's settling down here, and I can pull a little bit of it up. But it's going to keep doing that. Now I kind of like what it's doing right here. It might be a little bit of a hard edge, but I like the variation and the fact that there's several values of the shading, and they're all occurring in this one section. I'm also happy with that. It's soft enough for this kind of, what are these, cumulus cloud shapes, forms, and wherever they aren't, it's not so dark that I can't just lift it after it's dried. So, you know, you think, and I've watched artists do this, and frankly I'm amazed at some of them that are able to pull it off. Painting an entire sky with big brushes with a really wet paper, and trying to control all of that is a challenge. And there's a few people that I've watched do that were pretty good at it. My approach with all things is a little slower, a little more deliberate, and I like to watch things develop and then control what I can. And some of the accidents, just let them go if you like what's developing. So you have to think about when you want to introduce more water, because this is your vehicle. Water is always the vehicle, and your pigment's going to flow according to many things, the dampness, also the pitch of the surface that you're working on. Now, when I begin the larger work, which is going to be, I think it's 30 by 22, and I've already got a little bit of a sketch. So I suppose I can just, I don't really want to set this down on top of that, or I'll lose this. No, okay, I'll just hold this. This is what I'm going to, and I've sketched this old house, which hopefully you can see that. I'll have to adjust my camera in a minute. This old house is primarily, it's a big part of the composition, but also important back here are some mountains, which are going to be the Olympics. There's a little bit of the canal, that would be Southern Hood Canal, and there's a bunch of rocks here, and there's going to be I'm going to put a boat in the foreground that's beached, a big rockery, and you can see that I've started in the sky, but I need to do a lot of shading. Well, for my supporting my palette, so I don't have to be reaching all the time. And it's a pretty big surface, pretty big picture plane here we've got. So this little palette, I use a piece of foam core board so I can put it right on my paper and not get anything on there. And then I thought I'd show a couple of resource photos that I printed, and these are for the mountains, which I'm not excited about the print quality, but it'll work. I can see pretty much what I need to. I would like to probably saturate it with color, and I may still print one that way so that I can see the subtleties of the colors in the background there, the hills in the distance. Olympic mountains, one of my favorite subjects. And here's another print of the same thing. It's still is a little bit lacking. However, I can see it. I don't like what I see with the sky though, and I'm going much, I guess a sunnier day. It's not without clouds, but it's not going to be gloomy. And then the other things I always have on hand when I'm painting are some paper to, test paper for my color before I go right on to here. And it's just some old scrap stuff. I don't know, it's not very heavy. It's probably only about 8 pounds at the most. Then I have some of these. I've got a lot of these old test papers. And this was kind of pointless because I could tell I was trying to see how these were going to react, but then I didn't. I got a pretty good guess on what colors these all are, but I should label it. You should always, just grab your pencil and before you even do it, just write, okay, this is going to be compression, this is going to be cobalt, etc. And because sometimes they can surprise you. Obviously you can't go by the look of the tube. You can't really go by the look of the pigment coming out of the tube. It's only until it hits a white background and dries a little that you see what you've really got. So don't take anything for granted. So here we go, working from top to bottom. It's back to front really. And then my next step is I'll just paint some masking film along this edge and on the building, so those things don't get any color. I'll do that, I'll come back and we'll be getting into the shading of the clouds. Okay, so I've got my wall of masking fluid. Now I'm trying to identify what areas I want to introduce a little more shadow, and there's quite a few. Got this palette off to the side, little test paper. I'm using to protect the paper, the work. I'm using this piece of foam core board, just a prop for my arm, and water's off camera, but it's just a couple of jugs of water. I have 2 of them. That way I don't have to run out to the sink. I've got a utility tub I use. And so, where am I going to go? As I was talking about my first example, can't be afraid to use some darker values in this stage, because you want to create that the 3-dimensional nature of that cloud. And it won't happen if everything just dries flat. So if you want to be a little more dramatic, you need to add more values. You know, if it goes on the paper and you're just shocked and it looks like it's taking over, you can add more water and you can do a lift and you can get rid of some of it so that it doesn't become something that looks like it's totally out of place. Just the edge of the brush because the paper is very wet. Just touching it. Letting water move it. That's your vehicle. I've found too that the coolest stuff happens when you're not being overly timid about things. Step back every now and then, make sure you're not creating some kind of a pattern that looks unnatural. It's got to be organic. It's going to have to be soft, as all clouds are. Not that I've ever touched one. Brush and it comes sneaking down, and if you've ever done pen and ink work, you know, and you've used a nib that kind of harbors a big puddle of ink, then you're drawing or writing and all of a sudden a gush, a lot of ink comes out. Very upsetting. Well, you can do it here too, so always use your test paper. be aware too when you're working that you're not banding, repeating the same brush stroke and shape, so that it creates something of a pattern, and then that pattern becomes observable and it's kind of off-putting. So change it up a lot, turn your brush at different angles. Allow the same thing to take place over and over and over the same way, and then you'll avoid that kind of look of stamp pattern of development. Like if you tend to work totally from left to right, the switch go from right to left. If you tend to work from top to bottom constantly, I would suggest to try switching that up, going from bottom to top. If you see something developing that you're not too keen on, get after it before it becomes a thing. So I'm going back to the water, and then I've got paper towel, and I create a damp mop, put an edge on it, with control.